Those crazy Vikings from way up there in the Scandinavian Bermuda Triangle have figured out a super effective way to fight an EV battery fire, even if the damn thing is in catastrophic thermal runaway. I'm John Cadogan from Expert.com.au. New cars, cheap, Australia only, website, card. Now, this report is in roughly 2 parts. Part 2 is going to be...
The spraying unit is inserted through the window.
What you just saw was an EV in thermal runaway, and they stopped it, like dead in its tracks, dude, in under 1 hour. Bonus points, I suppose, because now there is one less Renault driving around on our roads. Yes. Pro tip, the liquid you just saw spraying all over that soon-to-be-dead Renault, it's not water. Well, it's not only water, so ponder that for just a sec, won't you? Part 1 coming up as well. Authoritative-sounding nutbags from the YouTube comments feed, peddling their hilarious but also ineffective, ill-informed horse shit as per usual. Gold, silver and bronze medal-winning EV conflagration nutbags in just a sec. This report is sponsored by NordVPN. Get 4 extra months of Nord free now at nordvpn.com/AEJC. Say you're in a cafe one day and you think you've just connected to the free Wi-Fi. But in fact, a hacker has just inserted himself between you and the internet and he's about to start ripping you off properly. How would you even know? This is called a man-in-the-middle attack. It's one of the most common ways to get hacked. But there's no law that says you have to be the next victim. You need countermeasures, and that's what NordVPN does. NordVPN does the stuff that you and I don't understand in the background. Encrypting your data, hiding your IP address, locking everything down, basically. Go to nordvpn.com/AEJC now. The 2-year plan discount is huge right now. Plus, you're going to get 4 extra months free. nordvpn.com/AEJC. Link in the description. Just subscribe, download the app and connect. 1 click later, your IP address is shielded, your online traffic is masked with NSA-level encryption across as many as 6 of your devices. NordVPN is the fastest VPN on the planet. It costs only about as much as 1 cup of coffee every month to keep your data, your identity and your devices secure. Because your location is masked, you'll be able to access streaming and other services that might be blocked where you live. Plus, you can continue to watch your favourite content when you travel. You might even be able to score some great deals on travel and accommodation that are not available at home. That happens all the time. Go to nordvpn.com/AEJC now, boost your security and enjoy that discount plus those extra 4 months of free subscription time. It's totally risk-free with Nord's 30-day money-back guarantee. That's nordvpn.com/AEJC, link in the description, and thanks to Nord for sponsoring this episode. Without further ado, here is today's bronze medal-winning YouTube comment nutbag.
Lithium is flammable in water. The only reason they use water on these fires is to try to cool the battery and not extinguish the fire, as that is actually impossible. However, if the battery casing is cracked and water comes into contact with the lithium, it explodes quite spectacularly.
Dude, lots of fairly uncommon metals react quite aggressively with water, I'd suggest. Take metallic sodium, for example. You don't see too much of that, do you? You don't go down to your local metal supplier and buy a piece of 2x2 sodium box section to go and build a boat from, I note. But you use sodium chloride every day, don't you? Like table salt, and it doesn't explode or do anything, even remotely remarkable when you put it in water. That's because the sodium is locked up in a compound it's no longer metallic. It's like an ionic compound, like a salt, literally. Okay? The lithium in batteries is like that. There is no metallic lithium in a lithium-ion battery, so it's kind of like the salt in the water, dude. Just saying, okay? Like, there is a type of lithium battery, like the non-rechargeable lithium batteries have a lithium, like a metallic lithium anode. And if you are so stupid as to disassemble that and stick it in your bottle of drinking water, it will react quite spectacularly. And that's what you're seeing if you ever watch a video of that nature about lithium batteries and water on YouTube. Lithium-ion batteries, like for your power tools and your laptop and your phone and your car, like your EV, not the lead-acid kind, but the traction battery in your EV, they're lithium-ion batteries. They don't have lithium metal in them. Silver now. The only thing that can put out such runaway electrochemical fires would be liquefied nitrogen or carbon dioxide. So close, dude, like so close. Spectacularly impractical suggestion based on zero knowledge of physics or chemistry, so close to be the creme de la creme of nut de la nut, but they're both ridiculous ideas, I get that, so well done there, but I think for gold, we're going to need more detail. I hate to disagree with an expert, but I had a thought for your consideration regarding how to put out an EV battery fire. As you correctly stated, this is an exothermic chemical reaction. Seems to me that the way to fight this fire is to reduce the temperature below the exothermic threshold with 2 H's. To me, obvious way to do that is liquid nitrogen. Liquid nitrogen would displace the oxygen of the other fires started by the batteries. It evaporates, adding no weight to the vessel's buoyancy, as opposed to its girlancy, and it is readily available. Yeah, so readily available. Just whip down to Coles or Woolworths or even Aldi and get yourself a couple of bottles of LN2 in case your EV is one day out there on the road. To all of you dipshits who never studied physics, chemistry, engineering, or even remained awake for STEM in frickin' high school, it is quite dangerous to presume that you just understand how the world works, because you don't. The world is flat out not intuitive. That's just not how this works. I've had dozens upon dozens of people in the comments tell me that LN2, like liquid nitrogen, is the way to fight these EV battery fires. It's not. Liquid nitrogen is not the way to fight any kind of freaking fire, because it's just so impractical. Now, for starters, right, there is a difference between temperature and heat. Ooh, that's kind of a scary concept, is it not? LN2 is really cold, and at the same time, it's comparatively shit at absorbing heat. It just is, like, especially compared to water. To store liquid nitrogen, you don't just put it in a bottle. It's not like a bottle like barbecue gas. You can't do it that way. You need to put it in a super insulated container, and the container has to be open, like continuously open. It has to vent, otherwise, boom, right? The pressure will just build up and build up and build up, because guess what, dude? There is some heat coming into it, and it's boiling. Liquid nitrogen is boiling in transit, okay? When you go to the dermodoc once a year and she sprays all over your head and burns off those precancerous whatevers, if you are, like a white dude like me, and that is a dewar. It's a super insulated container that's open at the top, and there's a small amount of nitrogen coming off continuously, and if you block that vent, that's bad, because the dewar turns into a grenade. And I'd suggest that the amount of liquid nitrogen you'd have to put on a ship to have any hope of doing anything worthwhile in the context of any fire, and its unworkability is just preposterous. Like, it's only got half the capacity of water to absorb heat. Like if you think about the number of kilojoules of heat that 1 kilo of stuff can absorb to go up 1 degree C or something in temperature, that's called its specific heat. Like water is about 4 kilojoules per kilo per degree C. Liquid nitrogen is about 2, but it's boiling, so it doesn't get to absorb heat to warm itself up because boiling is like an isothermal process, dude. So its latent heat of vaporization is roughly 10 times less than water. So when it's boiling, to keep it boiling, water has to absorb 10 times more heat per kilo to vaporize, right? So it's shit at absorbing heat. Liquid nitrogen's really, really cold, but really, really shit at absorbing heat. And let's think about using it for firefighting, right? What are you going to make the hose out of? Because the plastic hose from Bunnings, not going to cut it. It's going to get a bit brittle at minus 200 degrees C. And what are you going to build the plumbing out of? And how are you going to vent that and stop it from exploding? And if you spray it out of the end of the hose, how are you going to keep it liquid in the air while it bridges the gap between the nozzle and the frickin' fire? Like, come on. It's almost impossible to deliver. It's like, it's boiling. It's going to be a gas before it gets there, kind of thing. And even if it sinks down and displaces the oxygen, the battery's producing its own freaking oxygen, so you can't fight the fire by displacing air. It doesn't need the air to stay burning, right? Water is 10 times more efficient at absorbing heat while it's boiling and twice as efficient at absorbing heat while it's just kind of warming up in the fire, if you like, and so much more available. Like, you can actually buy bottles of water at the supermarket, so there's that. But aside from that, good suggestion, dude. Like, loving it. Liquid nitrogen, yeah, just get some liquid nitrogen, problem solved. I get that if you're a properly uneducated peanut, all right, it makes sense to say, let's get something really, really cold because of fire. It's really, really hot. Yeah. And then Muzz and Spanner and all the other beard-stroking dickheads sitting around the barbecue thinking, good suggestion, Trev. Right? But at the end of the day, because the world is actually a very spooky place and it's quite counterintuitive, this is a little bit like hypothesizing that if you're driving at 50 and then you change to 100, it's going to take twice as long to stop. Like, that's intuitive. It makes kind of sense. Except if you study physics, that's not how this works. It's actually, in the real world, it takes 4 and a bit times longer to stop, does it not? As long to stop. So pure physics says 4 times longer because energy is proportional to the square of speed, but in the real world you have to say, well, the efficiency of the brakes might degrade as well, and reaction time between the hazard being there and you being aware of it and reacting, you're covering twice the distance at 100 that you would at 50 for that whole reaction time phase. So in the real world, 4 and a bit times. This is kind of that. So it would seem that water is more or less the ideal medium to fight fires with because of its mad capacity to absorb heat, at the same time as with a conventional fire it's got mad capacity to smother the flames and deprive the burning interface of access to atmospheric oxygen, which is not a factor for battery fires because they're making their own oxygen gas. It's abundant, right? It's got this spectacular capacity to absorb energy, but is it really the best thing in this situation? Can we take water, perhaps, and just, in the immortal words of Matt Damon, science the shit out of it? Well, I'd suggest that the crazy Vikings have actually done that. And I give them 13 points out of frickin' 10 for that. They've done a really impressive job, and have to bear in mind that I am a spectacularly miserable bastard generally when it comes to awarding points for performances such as this.
A lithium-ion battery fire burns hotter, faster, and longer than a regular car fire. It can burn for more than 24 hours.
When this happens on land, there are some difficult methods to contain the fire, such as you can take the car and lift it into a container and submerge the car in water for a long period. But this is not doable on a ferry deck, so we cannot use that solution.
There's no denying your ancestry, is there? I mean, you can feel it. I certainly can. That Viking blood coursing through the veins. If he had been born just a few centuries earlier, I'm pretty sure he would have been up the pointy end of one of those ships with a dragon on the prong, sailing up the Thames to impregnate the Queen of England. Or the King. Just another man having a baby, you know. Women, brother. Where were we? Thomas Justinussen there. He's the chairman and CEO of Scansea Offshore, which is located in the Faroe Islands. Now, with a gun at your head, the Glock 19 on the temple, would you be able to point to the Faroe Islands on a globe of the world? Bet you can't. It's north of Scotland and east of Iceland and kind of west of Norway. If there was a Scando-Bermuda Triangle, it would be the epicenter. So, corner penthouse of Viking Central, essentially, historically, but these days there's just a shit ton of ferries that operate in that region, because if you want to take your car from, I don't know, Norway to Iceland, you probably do it by ferry, or if you want to go from Iceland to Denmark, there's a ferry for that, no doubt. So, what I'm going to show you now is an EV that is about to be placed in thermal runaway. And then the Vikings are going to kill it with their trademark plundering ferocity. It's quite entertaining. They're aided and abetted, of course, by the high-tech miracle of elegantly simple applied thermofluid theory. So yes, they are going to science the shit out of it. It's Viking plus science equals dead EV thermal runaway. I love this. This is a 5-minute video package from Scansea Offshore. It starts off a bit dry, but just bear with it, dude. I'm going to detain you for 5 and a bit minutes here, and it's going to be well worth the investment if you are concerned about the growing number of events of this nature. And P.S., TJ said I could use it.
The shipping industry has a major unsolved battery problem at their hands, especially when it comes to electric cars. The big concern is a very dangerous phenomenon called the thermal runaway, which is when one faulty battery cell starts a burning chain reaction through the battery pack. It is very rare, and it can happen at random to any car at any time. A lithium-ion battery fire burns hotter, faster, and longer than a regular car fire. It can burn for more than 24 hours.
When this happens on land, there are some difficult methods to contain the fire, such as you can take the car and lift it into a container and submerge the car in water for a long period. But this is not doable on a ferry deck, so we cannot use that solution.
There is a patented solution to the thermal runaway problem, and it involves a liquid called brine. Brine is a simple mixture of water and salt. Water freezes at 0 degrees, but brine can be cooled down far below the freezing point of water. Salt is also an excellent heat transferring material. Thermal cameras on the car deck will detect a potential problem already at 30 degrees, before the flames even start. As soon as the firefighters arrive at the scene, they will break the windows and insert the spraying unit. Then the car will be hosed down with minus 19 degree cold brine at 250 liters per minute. A tremendous amount of cooling energy is released into the car when the brine is pumped at this rate. The drencher system will simultaneously spray the car with water to keep the residual flames under control. Today we are going to see how effective this method is. The ferry has docked beside the test site, and soon this car will experience a full-blown thermal runaway. The onboard brine delivery system will be used for this demonstration.
This is actually a very simple system. It's connected to the cooling provision plant on board. We have 2 heat exchangers, and through the heat exchangers the brine is circulating and cooling down. Yeah, we are now on the car deck, and this is the area which we have allocated to electric cars. And on the ceiling you can see the discharge pipes are running all the way from the compressor room And here's one outlet. This is just like a normal fire hydrant. It's connected with a valve, and when we discharge, we simply push this button, and then the brine flows out.
For obvious reasons, this demonstration will take place outside the ferry.
We install a normal 1100 watt heating element.
To initiate the thermal runaway, fire technicians have already installed an electric heating element inside the car battery pack.
Then this is just going to be plugged in the socket tomorrow, and then the battery pack should go off.
We are now ready to start the demonstration. The heating element that will ignite the battery fire is switched on, and we wait for the thermal runaway to start. On the bridge, the crew wait for the thermal cameras to register the fire and sound the alarm. Soon there is visible smoke, and shortly after the fire alarm starts. There is a 2-minute delay from the fire alarm sounds until the drencher systems initiate. Firefighters are already dressed up because this is just a drill, but there has been implemented a 6-minute delay to simulate realistic crew response times. This delay in response time has been documented during several previous fire drills on the ferry. All time frames are therefore realistic. Now is the time to fight the battery fire. There can be high pressure gases inside the vehicle. The side windows are broken first to release potential pressure. The spraying unit is inserted through the window. The brine is released. The brine tank inside Norrøna contains 16,000 liters of brine. The pump capacity is 250 liters per minute, enough for at least 60 minutes of constant cooling. The salty mixture is also very efficient at discharging the battery. Now it's just a question of keeping the residual flames under control with regular firefighting methods. After 1 hour, the demonstration is finished and the situation is under control. The salty mixture has also discharged the battery to zero. After this successful demonstration, the captains of the ferry Norrøna do believe that they can transport electric cars without increasing risk level on car deck compared to non-electric cars.
How freaking awesome is that? What an elegant solution. No refrigerated brine on the Fremantle Highway, I know. Just saying. But all the EVs miraculously survived. So how did I find out about this? I found out about it because TJ reached out to me following the videos I did on the Fremantle Highway, which, let's not forget, occurred in his neck o' the woods. And he said, my background is as a captain on fishing vessels in my younger days, and the last many years as CEO and chairman in our companies. I've seen your comments on EV fires on ships. The idea to use... Didn't even look that time. Got it. Hole in one. The idea to use brine as a cooling agent for batteries comes from our experience of different ways of freezing fish, shrimps, crabs, etc. In theory, the cold brine will instantly kill a battery in thermal runaway, but this is if we submerge a battery in cold brine. As you know, the batteries in cars are well protected, and therefore we are mostly cooling the box that holds the batteries from the outside. We are still busy trying to find a safe way that is doable on a Ropax car deck. I think he means roll on, row, and pax for passengers, so Ropax. Ropax car deck to penetrate the battery's containment box, so we will get maximum effect by pumping the brine directly on the cells. Ladies and gentlemen, small round of applause for TJ and the brainiacs he has working around him, figuring out a solution to this growing global problem. So essentially they've supercharged water, haven't they, or supercooled it, by adding salt. Icebergs, of course, are fresh water and they're floating in salt water, which is at the same temperature. So there's your evidence there if you didn't pay attention at school, just saying. They've taken every litre of water and lowered its freezing point, and therefore they've given it another 80 kilojoules per litre of cooling capacity, or heat absorption capacity, if you like. It's going to absorb the heat, thus cooling the thermal runaway. And if it gets below the incipient temperature for thermal runaway, obviously the runaway goes out, doesn't it? Anyway, it's chilled to 20 degrees below zero by virtue of the added salt. And bonus points, they've made it a frickin' electrolyte. So it discharges the battery while it's cooling it down. Ladies and gentlemen, you know what's missing? What's missing is the final part of the solution to the problem that's facing TJ, is it not? How do we deliver this supercooled electrolyte directly to those cells? And I ask you, dude, what would you do about that? How would you achieve this? If this is going to be a salient feature of electric utopia in the future, what are you going to do about it? If you're the minister for unfucking this situation, what bill are you going to introduce in Parliament? How would you solve this problem? Well, here's how I'd do it. You see this? This is a battery pack flooding water inlet port on a giant fuck-off mining EV, like an underground mining EV. I don't know about you, but I can't think of a worse place to have a giant battery in catastrophic thermal runaway than in an underground mine, right? That could be bad. I think you'd agree. So how do you do it? Well, you build a port that goes directly, it's plumbed directly into the battery, and that port is a standard fire hydrant kind of connection port. So you get a standard kind of firefighting hose and you screw it on, and then you just open the cock. No reference to any politician, living or dead, is made. And that's what's missing on electric cars, I'd suggest. There needs to be some kind of universal quick connection port to deliver water or brine, whatever, preferably brine. Wouldn't it be lovely if the firefighting appliances in Electric Utopia carried tanks of brine instead of tanks of water? That would work out much better. Wouldn't it be lovely if they could all just do the Scandinavian two-step with a giant frickin' hose on the end of a fairly rigid lance and connect to a standardized quick connection port that was plumbed straight down into the battery to fight a thermal runaway. Now, firefighters need to be able to do that. It would kill the battery, and sometimes there's going to be situations where you need to buy time. The fact that there is not such a port is a preposterous cock-up. This is the only way you can contextualise this. Certainly it's the only way I can, given the increasing number of these thermal runaways happening in cities, right? It's a cock-up, and it is preposterous. When you look around the world, there are hose reels everywhere in buildings, right? Multi-level buildings have hose reels everywhere. There are fire hydrants in all the streets. We do this for a reason, not because it's a good idea, like it is a good idea, but we do it because there are regulations. And I'd suggest if we didn't have those regulations, they would be absent in many places because of financial expediency. And the reason they're absent, these kinds of measures, like a firefighting port in an EV, the reason that is absent is because nobody was really aware of this risk at the outset of EV design and widespread deployment. But the reason they're absent now is either latency or don't give a shit factor from a regulatory point of view, right? Here's a scenario. This is going to happen to someone, okay? Let's say you are that profound EV evangelizing twat. You've got your Tesla Model Y, you love it, you tell everyone zero emissions, and you're on the front foot of making the world a better place, okay? If that's you and your wife and children are out in your Electric Utopia mobile, they've just been to the movies or something or whatever, and they're coming home, right? And it's just a normal day, and then some drunk idiot in another car, whatever it is, probably a combustion car because, hey, just snots them a few k's from home. and they're injured and the car is damaged and they can't get out, right? Thankfully, we live in a fairly good society in Australia, and the response times for the fire brigade, who are the rescue dudes, and also the paramedics are pretty quick, especially in our cities, pretty quick. You get pretty good support in Australia if you're badly hurt. So let's just say that's all looking good. They're injured, but they'll probably be okay. They've got to be cut out. The fireys are figuring out a plan to do that. And all of a sudden, that electric utopia mobile just belches smoke, right? That is the battery telling you that it's in thermal runaway and flames and toxic gas soon to follow, right? If we go to a parallel universe where there's a firefighting port, like a battery killing port in all EVs, then same scenario, but the fireys would have already connected to that port and they'd be just waiting. They'd be ready to buy time if you need to buy time. As soon as they see smoke, or they might even put a temperature probe on the battery, right? And as soon as it starts getting warm, they flood the battery. They buy the time to rescue the trapped occupants who are near and dear to you, let's not forget. Now, which one of those universes, if that's you, right, if you're that twat and they're your loved ones, which one of those universes would you prefer to live in? This is a really serious situation. And what it would take to get that to happen now is we'd need to get all car makers to sit down together with all regulators and develop something like a and the first responders, let's not forget, because the details have to be right. They have to deploy the lance with the universal coupling on it, right? So everyone's got to be on board. We need to get regulators, first responders and car makers all to sit down and agree, and we need to come up with something like an FMVSS, like a Federal Motor Vehicle Safety Standard for the US, and a UN ECE regulation for Europe, and we need to have an ADR, and they need to all be the same, mandate exactly the same thing to protect people in exactly these situations in the future. And anyone who wants to tell me that, EVs don't burn that often, yeah, that's right. But the consequences when they do are very serious indeed. And it's like jet airliners don't crash that often, but hey, the reason they don't is because we've got procedures and practices in place to make sure that everyone's safe, even when something bad happens on board. We've got two dudes up the front who can fly. And if you're undergoing 1,000 Ks or something, you don't need two dudes up the front to fly the plane, but you need the second dude to double check the first dude, just in case he has brain fade on a critical item on the checklist, or in case something really bad happens and you need two brains working to solve the freaking problem. This is kind of that. Low probability, high consequences. This is the kind of solution that we need to deploy. So thank you very much, TJ, for your contribution to what could be saving a bunch of lives globally. And I'd really look forward to seeing, countermeasures like this rolled out on ships and widely in firefighting. And I'd really like to see it on the Spirit of Tasmania, incidentally, here in Australia.